I recently spent a day in Arcadia, Florida, a town that was the first place we ever did a YouTube video for our channel 5 years ago. And while the town is growing in a lot of ways and there are good changes, I can say that I've never been so disappointed at a Florida town because the things that are happening right now in Arcadia are truly depressing. Now, there are some good things like new home construction, new apartment construction, and new businesses going in. And it's good to see that because Arcadia has been economically deprived for a long time. I've never seen a small town with so much police presence. And after spending the day in Arcadia, I can kind of see why they need so much law enforcement in this town because crime here is literally out of control. Now, I interviewed 3 females on the streets of Arcadia who are homeless. That by itself is an alarming figure that just in one day I easily found 3 homeless females on the streets. But I talked to other people who are homeless off camera, and the horror stories that they told me about life in this town and how people are being taken advantage of here is absolutely pathetic. Now, Arcadia, Florida is in the southern half of the state, but the analytics here for many categories, specifically types of crimes, are actually on par with North Florida. So despite the fact that DeSoto County with 35,000 people is in the southern region of the state, when it comes to crime analytics, they're actually on par with the northern half. Now, one of the most frustrating things that I felt the people here were concerned about is how they were being taken advantage and how many people are arrested here for putting their hands on other people. And unfortunately, this is an aspect of life in Arcadia. I noticed that while people were walking away from the schools, that it was mostly just males that were walking away from the schools. I didn't see a single female student leaving the school on foot. And that just goes to show that parents don't feel safe letting their female students walk home from school. So like the parents pick up the girls or the buses take them home, but they don't let the female students walk through the neighborhoods. And that right there is something that I've seen almost nowhere in the United States, where an entire school lets out and only the male students are able to walk home. But that should just give you an idea of how concerned people in Arcadia are over the safety of their families because of how prevalent this little situation is in this town. I think that kind of just speaks for itself, so we'll leave that topic there. While driving through Arcadia, I did notice that there were new, beautiful homes going in some neighborhoods. But if you go through other neighborhoods, you also see abandoned areas where many of the houses are empty. And a lot of those houses, aka bandos, are now being squatted by the homeless people. Now, while trying to find the homeless people in town, I had a lot of struggle at first. And that's mostly because just recently they've gone in and cleared out some of the homeless camps. I'll do a video on that separately, but for now, you'll see that there's new apartments going in as well. Government housing here looks really nice and clean. They've started to pave some of the roads in Arcadia. Now, Arcadia possibly has some of the worst roads of anywhere in the state of Florida. But you see there a little tiny house on the left. It's got a blue tarp on the roof and plywood on the windows. After the hurricanes, a lot of people didn't take the plywood off the windows, and that should just let you know how people feel about safety in their community. This is the thing I've noticed in Florida, that after we have some hurricanes, a lot of people in bad areas will leave their houses boarded up for safety. That just indicates the way people are living. Now, I did record several hand-to-hand transactions just driving through town. I'm going to delete those scenes out of the video because there's no reason for me to incriminate somebody like that, but it's definitely clearly prevalent, more than anywhere I've seen in Florida. And I live in Bradenton, Florida at that, so that should just give you an idea of how bad the situation is in Arcadia, where a complete stranger who doesn't live in your town spends the day there, and they can already start to see focal points of consumption. That's fairly bad, and it's happening in public places. It's not like these individuals are afraid of law enforcement or afraid of being detected. Obviously, they have to have some type of impunity because it's not like they're hiding in the way they're doing it. But anyways, entire sections of today's video had to be edited out because there's points in the city where obviously this is happening, and it's all over the city. It's not just one area. Things are really bad in Arcadia. When I say they are bad, I mean it is disappointing how bad things have got here. And unfortunately, we know that, the town does have a large Hispanic population. With the changes that are coming now, we can assume that they could lose a huge amount of their population if these changes actually do take effect. And this will likely dive Arcadia into an even deeper pit, since that is kind of the core of the economy here. It's the people that work. So if now here's a town where you have a lot of homelessness, you have a lot of addiction, and then you get rid of the working class people, what do you think is going to be left behind? A void. What do you think is going to happen in that void? It's going to suck in all the bad from all of the surrounding communities. I feel like things really have the potential to get bad. You can see there's a Burger King right across the street. Behind that Burger King, you can just make out at the end of the road a dumpster, and that dumpster is a homeless camp that's being cleared right now. So there was a homeless camp back there. The city came in and cleared it. I walked around. I found a few needles here and there. It's believed that 7 to 9 people were living in this small piece of land at a homeless camp, but that homeless camp has now been cleared out and the garbage has been hauled away. But the homeless have already moved somewhere else, and that somewhere else is somewhere along the wooded outskirts of the city. Most of the city is surrounded by wooded areas. I did find somewhat of an idea of where the new homeless camps are from talking to locals, but unfortunately it got dark on us before we were able to get out there, so we'll have to leave that for another day. But again, that whole expedition will be on a separate video about homelessness in Arcadia. Overall, the town has had some great things happen. There's been a lot of new businesses. You can see on the left, I don't know if that's a racetrack or a Wawa, but they have new gas stations going in. It's starting to look more like coastal Florida with Publix's, new gas stations. My wife pointed out that it looks like they're getting a Starbucks perhaps here soon. But while there's been great advancements and new buildings going in and all these new constructions, that's the building on the left that my wife thinks looks like it's going to be a Starbucks. But yeah, there's new things going in. There's still a persistent problem on Arcadia. And it seems like these small rural towns in Florida have gone so far downhill lately. I mean, these towns were always poor and impoverished, but they were not crime-ridden. And they've become crime-ridden. So while there's more new buildings and gas stations and new restaurants and a lot more traffic on the major roads, a lot of the people that are working, building the new communities that are growing in places like Sarasota and Bradenton. The quarries are out here. A lot of the materials come from out here. So you see a lot of people working, a lot of heavy equipment moving through these little towns. It looks more economically, it looks like things have gotten better economically. New houses, new apartments, all these new things going in. But despite all that, there is still a long way to go for Arcadia, because crime has just spiraled out of control. And not just that crime itself has spiraled out of control, but it's just how normal it is. Especially the situation with Hand to Hand and, of course, the women. It's really deprived. And it's upsetting that a town here in Florida has got to this level where humans have become kind of like animals, that the only thing they care about is sensations, feelings, and not each other. It's a completely animalistic behavior of the people here and how they treat and view other people. It's pretty sad. Now, I noticed that there was a few homeless camps behind the Walmart. On the left side of the Walmart, way in the back, there's some mattresses back there in the woods. This blurred scene here is just one of the many interesting things that we noticed around town. Right on the outskirts of the Walmart, you can see there's mattresses and people laying on the ground here and stuff like that. So there's all kinds of homeless activity going on just right outside of this Walmart here, right on the outskirts, right behind the tree line. There's all a bunch of homeless people there. Now, homelessness is not just in Florida. Homelessness is now all over the United States. So it's not just a Florida thing. I was recently in Tennessee, and I think things in Tennessee look worse than Florida. I was in eastern Kentucky, things there look bad. I was in Ohio, things there look bad. I was in Atlanta, Georgia, and they have homeless camps in the median. So it isn't just the state of Florida. Homelessness has really got bad everywhere in the United States. And that includes small rural towns, which many people just naturally assume that this is a big city problem. It's a big blue city. No, small towns are actually more crime ridden now than big cities. So I did about 3 interviews, and while I did my interviews, my wife Katie was sitting in a car somewhere, and she said while waiting for me to do my interviews, she saw 3 hand-to-hand transactions take place. So it's just like open. It's not really like they're trying to hide it. And while these small towns have a reputation of being absolutely just brutal when it comes to arrests and how heavily handed law enforcement is, there has to be some cohesion between law enforcement and somebody in this town, because clearly it's obvious that some people are just completely unafraid of any type of law enforcement consequences they conduct their criminality. So it's a very concerning situation in these towns where it seems like some people are having a very heavy hand tossed at them from law enforcement, while other people can just openly conduct business. And I'm talking in the criminal element. It just seems like some people have complete impunity in this town in the criminal element. Law enforcement is supposed to be there to stop all crime, but it seems like they're only there to stop crimes from people who are in competition. So when you see a town spiral this much out of control, there have to be endemically some aspects of corruption. Something has to be wrong for things to get this bad. Towns don't just naturally get this bad. There has to be somebody here doing something awfully wrong. I mean, the conditions of the town are some of the worst of any town in Florida, if not possibly in the United States. And I am not exaggerating. There have been some recent improvements to the roads here, and it looks like they're busy working to fix it. But how did the roads in Arcadia get this bad? Somewhere, somehow, something didn't add up. And I don't know what it is. Something had to happen for the roads of this town, for the entire town to have roads in this condition. At some point, something wrong had to take place. And I don't know what that was, really, what led to that. But there's things in this town that they don't make sense. Because I've been all over rural America, and rural American towns don't get this bad. There's some things that are endemic to rural living, rural towns, but to the scale that they're happening here in Arcadia, it just doesn't make sense. The only thing I could think of is like California, for example, where along the coastline it's very expensive, and people that move further inland to the small inland towns, they get really, really bad, because it's kind of like the people that live in those areas are the people that just can't afford to live along the coastline. So like the only other comparison I can make to Arcadia is like when I went to California, for example, the towns that were just a little bit inland. So you think about Florida and California as being similar. You have a very expensive coastline, so once you get far enough inland, it becomes more affordable. And then all those people who can't afford Los Angeles, San Francisco, they end up cast into these small little towns. Like a good comparison would be El Centro, California. That's one town that's just way up there in the middle of nowhere, economically deprived. You know, in California, it's very similar to Florida. You know, like San Diego could be something like Naples or Sarasota. So it's kind of like a California scenario where, because it's so expensive along the coastline, these rural communities far inland just become, unfortunately, like a dumping ground of all the people that just can't survive along the coast. Now, this was a weekday. Arcadia is known as having some of the nicest, biggest antique stops anywhere in Florida. Like their whole downtown used to be about nothing but antiques. But if I recall, it was a little bit more lively last time I was here. It seems like a lot of businesses are not open. And normally if you come here during the weekend, all these little antique shops are open and there's people out and about and there's a better environment. But on a weekday, like what's downtown Arcadia is practically dead. And keep in mind, most people are going to be at the Walmart on the outskirts or, you know, some other part of the city. But, you know, last time, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we spent the day just looking for antiques in Arcadia. Maybe we could do another video like that here soon on a weekend and see what there's practically. I mean, I don't know if some of the antique stores have closed, but there used to be 20 antique stores here, literally, where you could just browse downtown, and I can see a lot of them are actually closed. Stores that were open last time we were in Arcadia that are closed now. So things are definitely not looking good, but there's still enough antique stores open to where I think it'd be a nice video to go hunting for antiques in Arcadia. And that's kind of one of the nice things about Arcadia is just the volume of antique stores that they have here. Now, I am somewhat of an antique trader, and to a small degree. And over the last few years, I haven't had as much time for it as I used to. When I lived in Naples, it was a huge hobby of mine. And right now, I've noticed the last time I took stuff to sell it there, they really wanted to lowball me really bad, which didn't make any sense to me because I figured if you're in a town where there's 20 antique stores, you would pay fair and that way you could sell more. But it seems like it's a declining business as well. Back in Naples, antiques would always move really well. You probably half the time I was getting 40 to 50% of the value. Every once in a while, I could get up to 60% on a really hot item that I knew would sell. But I was getting this stuff in volume because I had a hauling service. So it was kind of perfect for me to just be able to make $100 extra a week on antiques. Can't complain about that. But anyways, I guess I'll have to go to Arcadia soon and do some antique videos. The town's also known for their rodeo, which I'm allergic to. And actually, I've been invited to a few events at the rodeo place, and I've had to stop going because I get so allergic because they do hold those events. And anyways, I just struggle. I'm really sensitive to like animal smells and stuff, especially like horses and stuff. But you see there's some people sitting back here near the train tracks. I don't know what they're doing. But it was just interesting to see, I feel, how bad things have gotten in Arcadia. Now, the whole back of this building used to be graffitied out with all types of gangs, and the city came in, and they've done a pretty good job of cleaning up gang graffiti. This town had so much gang graffiti all over it. I made a video about it, and then after I made that video, law enforcement started cleaning up all of the gang graffiti. But literally the entirety of Arcadia, when you drove behind these buildings, was just nothing but like 8 or 9 different gangs that were marking up the city. And again, I made the video about it, and then they went ahead and decided to cover up the graffiti. You can see there how they've covered up a lot of gang graffiti. And I think it was one of those deals where perhaps my video was the reason why they got rid of the gang graffiti. And perhaps also after they cleaned up the graffiti, they had their trolls go to my video and say, there hasn't been graffiti in this town. We don't know what you're talking about. And I think even somebody made a video showing the same places that there wasn't. It was just ridiculous. It really, really was awfully ridiculous how they moved with just trying to cover up the fact that I made a video because their town had graffiti. But I mean, you can paint over graffiti, but you can't paint over the people in your town that are addicted. You can't paint over the victims in your town that are being treated as if they were chickens at a county fair down there. So that aspect is just bad. Another thing is the demographics of people. Usually, like, the white population's way more propense to addiction than other races. We know that by overdose rates, or the ratio of 2 to 1. But I feel like in Arcadia, I feel like everybody's dealing with addiction, right? Whether it's white or black or Hispanic, it seems like everybody out here, in one way or another, is dealing with addiction, regardless of race. It's not just like most rural towns; it's just the white population that has this problem. But no, here it's the blacks, the Hispanics. Everybody here is dealing with this problem, and it's really freaking sad. At one point during the video, I stopped to talk to somebody. It was a Spanish guy, but I thought he was English speaker, so I stopped to talk to him. And I thought he was an English speaker, so I could get an interview, trying to work out a deal with him. But turns out he didn't speak English at all. He was Spanish, maybe Mexican or Central American, I'm not sure. But he asked me if I had anything that could take care of his tooth pain. That's a pretty straightforward thing he was asking me. Maybe he saw the new truck and figured, I was looking for junkies because I had something to sell. So he was excited that I was looking for junkies or homeless people. He was, oh, you're looking for homeless people? Don't look any further. I'm right here. I'm like, yeah, that's not what we're doing. And I've done hundreds of homeless interviews, and I can't recall at any moment somebody anywhere else in America thinking that the reason I'm looking for homeless people is because I am trying to unload. And that just gives you an idea of how bad things are. And it wasn't an English speaking person. It was a Spanish speaking person. Now, in South Florida, the analytics for overdoses for Hispanics are not as high as the white population yet, but I think within the next few years, the overdose rates for Hispanics will be just as high as whites. You're starting to see depression, desperation among the Spanish community. I think it has a lot to do with many of the changes. People used to come to the United States as looking for the American dream, but the American dream doesn't exist anymore. You know, this country was founded on the notion of coming to this country as an immigrant and being successful, but they've destroyed the American dream at this point to where the American dream doesn't exist for anybody. And realistically, you know, I feel like kind of that's part of the depression about a lot of people that immigrated to the United States undocumented, is that they came here thinking that there was a dream on the other side, and they're realizing that it's just a depressing place to live, hateful, oppression. A lot of times when people came here, they were really disappointed. There was a time when America was a country you moved to for dreams. I wouldn't doubt there's homeless camps back in this little area here, but I didn't have time to explore it. And also, I didn't feel comfortable leaving the car anywhere around here because it's kind of isolated, so it didn't really work out. But anyways, I thought if I did it, I would draw the wrong attention. But you can see garbage piles all through the side of the road here. I feel like a lot of the Hispanics, though, have really just become sad, depressed, kind of like the rest of the people in the United States. There was a time when Hispanic communities were optimistic about their future, optimistic about their opportunities in the United States, but it's starting to change to where now Hispanics are just as depressed as Americans, because it's starting to be clear that they're unwanted. And there was a time where people looked at Hispanics as hardworking people. They felt like there was always that small percentage that was like, you know what, we're glad you're here to work. But sentiments have changed about immigration in the United States, and it's gotten to the point where it isn't even just opinion, it's more like hate. And a lot of people have just that are here don't want to go back to their wherever they're from, or can't go back to wherever they're from, but they're here undocumented, and they've kind of like hit a depression spell. There's also a cultural aspect. I've always said on my channel that I think music is possibly one of the largest sources of mental contamination that exists in the United States. And now the music that has been contaminating the United States has also become prevalent in Latin America. So now, you know, back in the day, music of Latin America, the United States went into rap music and heavy metal and all these music genres that promoted self-destruction. But in Latin America, music was still dance, bachata, merengue. But now I think that trap has kind of taken over the Hispanic audience. Now they're listening to the same garbage that contaminated the American children. Now people from Venezuela, Mexico, Latin America are listening to the same contamination through social media, music, entertainment. And, you know, I feel like the United States has influenced culturally Latin Americans to where now Latin Americans are just as prepared to have that cultural influence. You would never hear Spanish music other than, like, you know, maybe regional Mexican music might have been an exception, but they only talked about three different things, the green, the white, and the black. But now it's just become where like Latin American music talks about all the substances that are prevalent right now in the United States as if it were cool, as if it were something to do. We've seen songs that are top charting in Spanish mention these things, and now you have this cultural influence telling the youth that it's cool to do these things. It's popular, it's in music. You know, the songs that you're listening to now that are top trending in Latin American music are making the same references that English music, rap was making, or heavy metal or whatever. And now even country music has done that. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. When country music started to do that, it was shocking that country music would do that, but they did it. It's gotten to the point where Latin American music is now the same garbage as American music in its lyrical content. And that's influenced a lot of the young people as well. So you have this thing where, like, Even if Latin American people migrated to the United States, their culture and identity was still Latin American. But now the young people that are migrating over here are already, before they touch foot in the United States, because of Instagram, YouTube, social media, they're already acclimated to the culture and practices that are happening here in the United States. You know, the country of Colombia, for example, is having the same problem now as the United States, where, you know, it's out of control over there. So, you know, as markets close and borders closed, it left a lot of stuff on the other side. But, you know, just to summarize that idea, there's been a cultural unification that has brought the same lyrical garbage and contamination to the ears of people, and the ears go right into your brain. And now these young people are listening to all this music that's talking about all these things, and now they think it's normal. They become acclimated to it, and we are seeing now that the overdose rates for Hispanics are starting to mirror that of the overdose rates in the United States. And I think predominantly Dominican, Colombian, Salvadorian, Mexican to a smaller degree, but it's becoming the same issue, that now it isn't just the white population that has its problem, but it seems like uniformly all races are starting to level out with their overdose rates. And that's bad because it's more people in volume that are now propense to addiction, where before it was just one group that had this problem. Now it's everybody that has this problem. And I don't think, Spanish families are economically more deprived. They have less assets. They have less opportunities. So it's not like the white community where they have an economical buffer when somebody overdoses, or, these families are more economically vulnerable. When they lose somebody, it's fairly difficult for them to be able to assimilate that loss. It's not like American people where they have more things, they have more inheritances, more money. You're talking about people that are much poorer. And again, one of the things that I think is happening in Arcadia is that the homeless, the orphans of tomorrow are being created right now by the situations that are happening here. So this is public housing. Now, in the state of Florida, there's a law where if you are caught with anything near public housing, 1,000 feet of public housing, it becomes an enhancement. The same thing goes for parks and schools. Well, the thing is, like, most of the Black and Hispanic neighborhoods in Arcadia, particularly African-American neighborhoods, have an abundance of public housing and churches right in their communities. It means that anybody, literally anybody, African-American who's caught with anything is most likely going to be within 1,000 feet of a church. Now, I don't know how active these churches are. Are they even open? I've never seen these churches open. And I've driven through on Sundays and stuff, and most of these churches are not even open. I don't know when they get together, if they get together, but here's two churches in front of each other right here, apparently, right? So these African-American communities have all these churches that I don't know what purpose they serve for their community, because I've never seen their doors open. But just the fact that those churches are there means that anybody in this community here who's caught with anything is now going to face an enhancement, because there's a law in Florida that aggravates your criminal offense if it's near a church. Here's another church right here. Now, again, I don't know why a community of 50 houses needs 5 churches. I don't know how the African-American communities got to this point. Maybe they're not unified, because if they were unified in belief, then they would have 1 or 2 churches. Here's another one right here. Why does a community need of this small, right, need 5 churches right here? Why are there 5 different religious establishments in this little neighborhood, just on this little drive right here? It makes no sense. Well, because those structures are there, and now here's a park up ahead, right? So within this entire African-American community, this is the black part of the city, the black area here. Within this whole African-American neighborhood, you're never more than 1,000 feet from a church. So any African-American person in this area gets caught with anything, and they're getting enhanced charges. So the white person on the other side of town, if they get caught with something, it might be, 3rd degree, or I don't know how the criminal system works, but it aggravates your offense to a higher degree. So now, if a white person gets caught with a needle and a rock, they might get 3 to 6 months. If it's a black person, now they're going to wait for 5 years, because within 1,000 feet of a school. Go figure. It's really messed up what's happening in Arcadia, and I don't know how the African American community hasn't woken up to the notion that by having all these empty churches, because I've never seen anybody at these churches, just the fact that the structure is there means that anybody caught. Here's another one right here. Why do they need this many churches in a small town? And I've never seen any. And here's a homeless shelter here, and I believe that's the same type of facility that would fall under that regulation. So what is happening in Arcadia is that when the black people mostly get caught with anything, it becomes an aggravated offense. Now, I really do not understand how the African American, maybe because of what happened in the past, they feel like they gotta have these community centers. Here's another church right here. But I just think it's crazy that just in this little area, you have like 10 churches. So the only real effect that I feel like they're having on the community right now is that it's sending people away for a very long time. And if a white person on the other side of town commits the same crime, it doesn't matter because they're not within 1,000 feet of a church. So I don't know how these towns got like this, why it got like this, but it would be an interesting topic to dig further into, is the effect that these churches are having on their community, because it's literally stripped people out of their community. There's probably 50, 60, 70 people from this neighborhood right now sitting in a freaking DeSoto County jail because of those enhancements. And I have no idea in the state prisons, people that get shifted to state, but just within their county jail, I recently looked through like every single arrest, and there's probably 60 or 70 people just sitting there right now because of those enhancements. What are you doing to your community? I mean, it's a problem that is affecting everybody, but it gets punished heavier in these communities because of the presence of these structures. I don't know. I have no idea what's going on in Arcadia, but it's definitely sad, depressing, and there is a large homeless encampment somewhere on the outskirts of the city, but it's a massive wooded area, and I haven't been able to track it down. But it would be nice to actually go into these encampments and see how people are living. I did get footage of the one that got closed down. There were needles everywhere, and that's the case in just about all the homeless camps. So I think at this point on our YouTube channel, most of our subscribers understand that homelessness is 95% derived from addiction. Then there's that other 5% of people. But you also have to consider that you have the people that are abused, you have the people that are orphaned, you have the people that have childhood trauma, you have people who had an accident at a young age while being homeless from a young age. So you can't really blame their homelessness on addiction. Their addiction is part of their homelessness, but not vice versa. It's a very complicated subject. Most people simply say, well, because they have addiction, it's their fault. But that isn't exactly true. Okay? It's not true because it didn't start like that. Notice these apartments here on the right. I think these used to be public housing, if I'm not mistaken. They might have been apartments. Either way, they've been closed up for a while. See, they're fenced up. So there's definitely a lot of structures in Arcadia that are just sitting there doing nothing. And this is kind of like the irony of the United States. I think this is another church right here. I'm not sure. Maybe a government building. But you have all these structures that are empty and vacant and with, a 6-foot barbed wire fence around them. And then you have people living in the woods. It doesn't make sense. This isn't, homelessness is now also becoming normal in all of Latin America as well. But the United States, despite being, quote unquote, the greatest country in the world, how some people say, also happens to be the country where homelessness is the most rampant. Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And the craziest thing about the United States overall isn't that there aren't resources and there aren't structures and there aren't things to make things better. Materially, everything exists in this country, but it seems like the mismanagement of things is what's leading to a dysfunctional society. But that's just my own personal opinion. And this is the town of Arcadia, a town that, is disappointing where they're at right now. When me and my wife moved out of Naples, we had looked at houses in Arcadia. It just didn't work out, but it could have been us living in this town. And now I look back on it and I'm thankful it didn't work out, because it seems like progress isn't finding too many people here. What's finding people here are lengthy prison sentences, This little bridge right here used to be completely covered in graffiti and destroyed, and now they've made a nice little park of it. The first time I went to Morgan Park, everything was covered in graffiti. It was just completely destroyed, but now it looks a little bit nicer. But legend says that there's a huge homeless camp somewhere along the Peace River. It'd be nice to try to find it and see how the people are living there. I walked for miles at night through the woods here and I couldn't find anything. My legs still hurt today. This is Arcadia, Florida. It's a town that's beautiful, historic, but that is facing some serious challenges. Crime, addiction, homelessness, and possibly mismanagement of some sort in some way or another is leading to Arcadia living right now a nasty episode. I don't think things have ever been as bad in Arcadia as they are now. And with mass deportations around the corner, I believe things are about to get a lot worse here.